Howdy, howdy. What is going on? And welcome back to the Back of the End Zone podcast. This is episode 21. I'm Josh Ryzik here with Brian Koleski, and we are so thrilled to be finally
back together
in the studio. Yeah, after probably going through 8 or 9, close to 10 episodes worth of the podcast being on Zoom.
Yeah.
And now that we're finally back together in person in the studio,
feels great. And guess what starts this weekend, baby? College football. And football in general. I've been watching, the NFL preseason has been on. Say what you want, it's still entertaining. The Ravens 24 winning streak, preseason winning streak came to an end on Monday night.
Came to an end, but
got to see some of the rookies play. And man, now this week you got week 0. Not a lot of entertaining games, but it's still football. I'm still going to watch. I know Josh is still going to watch.
100%.
And next Thursday, you got some games. A big one with Florida at Utah next Thursday. And, man.
Dude, we're just so happy that we started this podcast back last spring. And just this whole time we've been leading up to the start of college football. And it's finally here. Finally here. NFL is just around the corner, too.
As you can see, we got some new decor. We are from the University of South Alabama. We had to represent.
Courtesy to Bryant. And, we're both repping the South Alabama Jaguars today. They take on Tulane week 1, so they have a pretty big game.
That's a dub. Sorry, Tulane. That's a dub.
It will be. We already know. But looking ahead to what we're talking about in this week's episode, we're just kind of going to give more of our previews for who we expect to come out on top of each Power 5 conference, and give our predictions for those conferences, give our college football playoff predictions. Picks. Yeah, and see.
And who we think will be the last one standing and be the national champion.
And there could be some bias with that. Maybe not. I don't know. Brian definitely doesn't have bias. I don't think I'm going to have
I have bias with one of my picks, and I don't care. You can't tell me crap. It's going to happen. It's one of those years where everybody's doubting this team, and they're going to get back to at least the playoff. Or probably they might not win it all, but they'll get back to the playoff.
Yeah, hey, we'll see what happens. So, and we're also going to dive into some recent little buzz in the college football world, what happened with some former players and whatnot. But
you got 2 college football documentaries that came out.
Yeah.
Johnny Manziel, Untold documentary, and then Swamp Kings about the Urban Meyer-led Florida Gator teams that were just nasty, ruthless. And they got after it, and they were some great teams. Bama put an end to that, making Tebow cry, but that's okay.
Yeah, but let's dive right into it with segment 1. Before we dive right into segment 1, we would like to thank one of our sponsors, 251 Poolworks, for sponsoring this segment and for sponsoring our podcast. And 251 Poolworks is family-owned and operated. And 251 Poolworks offers pool cleaning, maintenance, and repair. And they serve the greater Mobile, Baldwin County, and Pensacola areas. So if you're needing any monthly pool cleaning, service, and or repair, give them a call at 251-978-7736 for the Pool Works.
And with summer slowly coming to an end,
with this Alabama heat
it's still hot as
this Alabama heat.
It's still hot as hell, so you still might want your pool. But with fall coming up, you be time to drain your pool, get them to clean it, and they do great work. So thank you to them. So for this segment, we're gonna go back to one of our first episodes where we did our pre-spring picks for conference champions, college football playoff, and national champions. It was pre-spring. There's a lot, we didn't know back then. Now that it's, fall camp is coming to an end, you got games starting this weekend. A lot of teams are starting their game preparations. I know South might be.
A lot of teams now have their starting quarterbacks. There's a couple of big schools that don't, but a lot more stuff is. It's a lot more easy to kind of pick.
A lot more clear. The picture is now more clear.
Yeah.
Like Florida just named Graham Mertz their starting quarterback. Auburn named Peyton Thorne, who I think they should have gone with Robbie Ashford to start, but I think Peyton Thorne still fits that system pretty well.
Arizona State with
Jaden Rashada, who everybody thought his career was over after he rejected Miami and Florida because of money issues, but I'm excited to see what he does there. And so I'm gonna dive right in with the SEC. I still got LSU. I just think with now Georgia named Carson Beck the starter, which we all figured that was going to happen. I just think LSU with what they got coming back. You saw what Brian Kelly could do in his first year as the head coach at LSU with more and no knock to Notre Dame, but more superior talent, more physical talent up front with the O line, with the defensive line, because that's really where you got to be good up front to win national championships.
And Jaden Daniels, man,
and Jaden Daniels,
he's electric. And
probably the most experienced quarterback in the SEC outside of maybe Will Rogers from Mississippi State, and maybe Spencer Sanders, who's probably the third string quarterback at Ole Miss by now.
Yeah, but I mean, and then they have like a bunch of receivers coming back, like Kyron Lacey and stuff like that. I have LSU coming out on top of the SEC too.
And I don't think it's going to be, LSU's going to run away with it. I think it's going to be close. I think it's a realistically 3-team race in the SEC. LSU, Bama, if they can figure out the quarterback situation. I think they know who their quarterback is. I just don't think they're going to announce it yet, because one thing about Bama that their first game, they don't have to play a starter. They can play all of them, and then whichever, because they played Middle Tennessee State first week, they can play all of them in that game with the ones, and whichever one probably does the best is probably who they're going to roll out there against Texas week 2.
Easily.
But they do have to figure it out kind of early, because they do have Texas coming in. Georgia, I think they make it to the SEC championship game. I think they go 11-1 throughout the season. When we talked about Georgia in one of our previous episodes, I think they get upset at Tennessee.
The thing with Georgia though is and everyone's still hyping them up, and they have the reason to hype them up, because 2-time back-to-back national champions, and I think they're the one team that could three-peat.
Yeah.
But I think with what LSU has and what they're building there, they have Harold Perkins coming. Like
got Malik Neighbors.
Their defense is so elite, and and same with their offensive returners, and with everything that they have coming back, I think LSU's easily coming out on top.
They're easily one of the most experienced teams up front on the defensive line. They got Mason Smith coming back. I think that's his name.
Becky Wingo.
So LSU, I think, is the pick for me. And I'm a Bama fan. I would love nothing more than to beat LSU, but I think LSU goes into Tuscaloosa on November 5th, and it's a close game, but I think LSU pulls out that win. I think Alabama goes 11-1, but falling short to LSU. So you want to do with the Big Ten next?
Yeah, going into the Big Ten, I think most of y'all that already watch our podcast, I think you know what my answer is going to be. Brian's a Bama fan, and he picked LSU to win the SEC, and I agree with him. I think LSU is going to win the SEC, so he wasn't biased with his pick there. But obviously, with the Big Ten, I think Ohio State's coming out on top. And yes, I know that's difficult, and I am aware right now that it's more than a flip of a coin. Like Michigan does have that jump over Ohio State right now. They've beaten Ohio State the past 2 years, and they have that edge. They're playing Ohio State at home this year in the Big House. They have the advantage over Ohio State to easily walk away with the Big Ten championship. But I just think that right now, with what Ohio State has returning, I know right now it's still a coin toss between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord at the quarterback position. And I know that Michigan has Blake Corum, they have J.J. McCarthy, they have all these other returning guys. But I think that right now, just with Ohio State's returning depth to their linebackers, their front seven, their secondary, I think that Ohio State's going to have the edge. Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, is going into his second year. And I honestly think, I'm not trying to sound ridiculous here, but I think Penn State has a chance too to even Penn State could really come out on top of the Big Ten.
I've seen some people pick them as well, because and it's the same thing with the SEC, where it's I think in reality it's a 3-team race, maybe more of a 2-team race, just because we don't know what Drew Aller is going to be at Penn State. But if he can get rolling early, it'll be a 3-team.
Yeah, James Franklin will be scary, because James Franklin every year, I think the COVID year was the one year where he had a bad year. And we talked about this when we talked about Penn State. But dude, James Franklin, when he's good, man. And I don't really think that he's had that good of a quarterback yet. And if Drew Aller can do it, man, Penn State could come out on top.
I'm picking Michigan again. It's the same premises. I'm going with like I did with LSU. Michigan just has so much returning. They got J.J. McCarthy back for his third year. Got Blake Corum back, who was a surprising, comeback. Then you got the Mammoths they got up front.
Yeah,
the back-to-back Joe Moore Award winners. Probably going to win it again this year. The defense I'm a little concerned about, but not really. I think where I'm more concerned about in the defense is maybe the secondary, but not so much. I think they'll be fine defensively. But I look at what Michigan has, and not only that, but their schedule is I'm sorry, Michigan fans, it's a cakewalk until you get to Ohio State. I mean, you got Penn State, but I mean,
and Harbaugh being suspended for the first 3 games doesn't do anything for them anyway. Because it's like they're playing UNLV, and I don't even know who else they're playing. I can't remember because they're so easy.
They play Eastern Carolina first game, so I mean, but Michigan, I think. And they play the Buckeyes at home. I think that's a huge advantage when you beat them 2 years ago at home. Then you went into the shoe and beat them for a second year in a row, something that rarely ever happens. You beat them back to back. So I think they three-peat the Big Ten. I'm sorry. I just think
that right now Ryan Day is in a mindset where it's like this is his like kill or be killed season, and I think that he's gonna go in there and just tear the heads off.
Well, I think Harbaugh is in. This is probably Harbaugh's best team he's ever had at Michigan. I think he's in that mindset of riding off into the sunset. Where if he wins the Big 12 again, not Big 12, the Big 10 again, he wins the game between Ohio State and Michigan again, and he makes it to the playoff and makes it to the national championship game. Not even win it, he just makes it there. He could, especially with everything that's going on in the NCAA. I think he hates it. As being a college coach and an NFL coach, I think he could take this huge successful season that Michigan's probably going to have and ride off into the sunset with his bit. Because there's a scenario, and I've heard this before from analysts, and I've thought about it, where if J.J. McCarthy has a great year, another great year, he takes that next stump like we talked about with David Cohen back in June. He could play himself into the first round. Maybe I don't know if he's going to be,
maybe. I still see him staying at Michigan for another year too, because I don't think their season's going to pan out how they want it to this year.
Well,
I don't think.
But if J.J. McCarthy pans out and Harbaugh goes to a team like if he went to the NFL, he goes to a team that needs a quarterback. Say you go, I don't know, the Rams, or like Matthew Stafford retires. You're the Rams, or you go to Tampa Bay, who's going to need a quarterback. I'm sorry, Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask is not the guy there.
I mean,
Jim Harbaugh could go there and then have his quarterback back in J.J. McCarthy in the NFL. But I mean, I think J.J. McCarthy is going to have a huge number. Blake Corum is my Heisman pick. I think he's just a stud, and that offensive line he's got is going to give him a huge edge. So I'm telling you right now, a team to watch out for is not Penn State, because Penn State is not really considered a sleeper when
I don't even think you know.
It's Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin is especially,
and their schedule is not that tough. They only play out of the big 3 in the East: Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. They only play Ohio State, and they play them at home in Camp Randall.
Yeah.
So if they can go 11-1.
With the one loss to Ohio State, and then
or even pull off the upset against Ohio State and make it to the Big Ten championship game, they would be in a great spot to win the conference.
And they could make the playoffs.
They could make the playoffs. So 100%. Don't leave out Wisconsin.
That is true. And I mean, now shifting over to the Big 12, I think most people all have the same Big 12 kind of choice here.
I would think so, but I think this one's a little bit more wide open because, and we're both going to go with Texas to win.
For me, though, I'm just picking Texas. I mean, I know
it's like a vanilla pick.
It is a vanilla pick, but I mean, like, they have obviously Quinn Ewers coming back, and Quinn Ewers coming off this injury. Like, I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. They have Xavier Worthy, one of the receivers, coming back.
A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, A.D. Mitchell. They have so much depth between Byron Murphy, the second two, on their defense. Like, they just, I don't know.
And then they got a freshman wide receiver coming in, Dante Cook.
I don't know. I think they're just a scary sight for the Big 12. And I know we talked about Kansas State and teams of that nature, but I don't think that they have the edge that Texas has going into the second
It's just
year.
Texas, though. And I'm sorry, and I'm not making fun of Texas, but they've always claimed their back just about every year since they lost to Bama in the 2009 championship game. And last year Quinn Ewers got hurt in the Bama game. Okay, that's not really their fault. But then they also lost some close games down the stretch to TCU. I think they lost to Kansas State. And I wouldn't count out Oklahoma as well because Oklahoma is a national brand. They'll be looking to do some damage and make a good impression before going to the SEC.
I just think that Steve Sarkisian, however you say his last name, Sarkisian.
He's got his best team at Tech.
He does.
He's got one of it, and he's continuing to recruit pretty well. He's got a top 5 class, I think. And
and we'll see how Archie plays by the time that he's in the SEC playing. So.
But I think it just solely depends on Quinn Ewers. Can he finally be the guy? He's cut off the mullet. He seems like he's a lot more serious, and that he's grown up and mature. I like what I see from Quinn Ewers. He could potentially be a top 10 pick in next year's draft. A lot of people are picking him to win the Heisman, which is not a bad pick. And I wouldn't be, and I don't want it to happen. I don't think it'll happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Texas came into Tuscaloosa and did upset Alabama week 2 just because you're more sure about what Texas has right now than you are with Alabama. But the teams to watch out for in the Big 12, though, you obviously got to watch out for TCU. I don't mean just because everybody's expecting them to fall off just because of their Cinderella season last year. I don't think it was a Cinderella season. I think Sonny Dykes is building something there. Kansas State, obviously the reigning Big 12 champs.
Yep.
They lost some pieces. They lost Deuce Vaughn, but I like their quarterback Will Howard. I like their defense.
I don't know. I think Texas has in the bag either way.
Watch out for Texas Tech, man. I'm telling you, Texas Tech. That's a tough game. They get Oregon at Texas Tech week 2 or 3. It's gonna be tough. So, but I think we're both gonna go with Texas Texas. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But I think the Horns are back.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure we have the same pick for the next conference too, going to the ACC with Florida State. I have Florida State coming out on top there. I think that's – it's not a clear-cut decision because obviously I think Clemson's going to have another phenomenal year, and it's going to be really hard if Florida State beats Texas – not Texas. If Florida State beats Clemson when they play each other. I can't remember when
I'm sorry. I'm changing this. I got Clemson coming out.
Whatever you say, but I think regardless, it's going to be hard for Florida State to beat Clemson twice. And I think that they can do it. They have a lot of returners. They have a lot of transfers coming in like Brandon Fisk, Pentrell Cypress. Obviously they have Jordan Travis, who's going to have a phenomenal year, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. And I just think that, I don't know, we talked about this when we talked about Florida State. I think Mike Norvell is the guy there. And just every single year, what he has built there, I think that he has the edge over Dabo right now. And Cade Klubnik's coming in. I know, but
the one difference for me, and I originally had Florida State before we started this, but I'm changing it to Clemson. Garrett Riley. What Garrett Riley did with Max Duggan and TCU.
That is true.
I like Cade Klubnik. I like the receivers they got. Will Shipley is a dog at running back. Some people have picked it. Some people have picked him as like a dark horse to win the Heisman. Some people have picked him as like ACC Player of the Year. He's a complete. He's an all-complete back. He kind of reminds me of Christian McCaffrey. Not because he's white.
Because he's white.
But no, it's not because he's white, but just because of the way he runs. I just like Clemson. They get Florida State at home, and in the ACC title game, they're always dominant in that game, no matter who they play. And you also got to look out for North Carolina with Drake May.
That is true.
I just worry that Drake May is going to have to do everything himself. But I got Clemson. Because I think Clemson is still that team. Florida State's coming along; they're recruiting well.
The thing is, I think that Florida State. I think Florida State finishes.
I think Florida State's a year away.
I think their one loss comes to LSU this year.
I think they get 2 losses: LSU and Clemson.
I don't think so. We'll wait and see because it's coming up. That game is a week from Sunday, when LSU and Florida State play each other. But I think that game is going to be wire to wire, and I think that game could be a potential college football playoff rematch. Maybe
it definitely could,
and that's
the beauty of having that game so early in week 1 is it doesn't matter as much as you might think. It does matter because whoever wins that game is going to have, say both of them are 11-1 down the stretch. Both LSU and Florida State are 11-1 down the stretch. but LSU has the win over Florida State, or vice versa, the committee could look at that and say, hey, they won the head-to-head. Now, sometimes the committee has overlooked the head-to-head, but
I mean, and we look back to, say, the 2021 season. Ohio State lost to Oregon week 3, and it's like, and then from that they worked their way back up all the way until they played Michigan and lost. They worked their way back up into the top 4, and they're projected to make the playoff. I mean, obviously Michigan did, but I mean,
yeah.
Those early losses, I feel like the first 3 or 4 weeks, if you get a loss to a better team,
same thing with Alabama and Texas. I mean,
have a chance at
if that game was close, and Texas loses Alabama by 1 point again or by a touchdown, okay, and then or say now what would hurt Bama in that situation is they lost at home. If it was vice versa, but if it was a close game and Alabama went 11-1 and won the SEC, they'd be in. Same with Texas. If Texas went 11-1 and their only loss is to Bama, but they win the Big 12, like if they lose to Bama in a close game, I mean it's a very easy argument. Hey, Texas deserves to be in, but
yeah, I mean, no, most definitely. But I mean, now looking over to the Pac-12,
the Pac-4 now,
yeah, literally the Pac-4 after this upcoming year. But I mean,
the final Pac-12 champion.
Yeah, so for me, I think Bryant has the pick that I was going to have, and for the longest time, I have been riding out Utah. I still think that Utah surely could three-peat, but I think this year, looking at the Pac-12, I have Washington coming out on top.
That's not a bad pick, Michael Penix.
We talked about Michael Penix. Michael Penix could win the Heisman. I don't think he will.
The receiver, Romeo Dunze, I think that's his name.
Romeo Dunze. And he came off of a phenomenal year last year, and I think he was very, very underlooked. Not many people really paid attention to it. And I mean, it's because they're Washington, but they went 10-2 last year. They're coming back with a ton of returners. I think almost their whole starting lineup is almost all returning. And they got a couple good big transfers in. Good defense too, and I mean, I think the Pac-12 is just as wide open as it could be right now. Like Utah's really good, but I mean, I think USC can only go so far with Lincoln Riley because he doesn't have a defense.
You just don't know what they're going to be on defense. Now, Oregon is also a good pick because Oregon, they got Dan Lanning in the second year. Bo Nix is coming back for his 18th year. They're going to have a great defense. They're going to be physical. They got added some transfers. I just like Utah, man. People underlook them every year. People were picking USC last year. And
Utah beat them twice, man.
Utah beat them twice.
Cam Rising is a dog, man. I think one thing that hurts them though.
And Kyle Whittingham develops Utah like an SEC or a Big Ten team, which I think will bode well for them in the Big 12 once they join the Big 12 because they're very physical on defense. They're physical up front. And they play a style of football that USC doesn't, or Lincoln Riley's teams don't like to play. Physical.
That is true. The only thing not the only thing, but I mean, one of the big things that worries me is I feel like a lot of that offense, I mean, yes, they have Cam Rising returning for his last year of eligibility, but a lot of that offense was ran through Dalton Kincaid. And them losing Dalton Kincaid, who got drafted in the first round of the Bills, I think that's one thing that hurts them more than anything because he was a key blocker. And I swear, like when they needed, say it was like 3rd and 20-something or whatever, like that dude could get open and he would run people over. And I feel like that's one piece that like they haven't filled in as of right now. And that's why I just think Michael Penix Jr., man, he has the edge with Washington.
But I mean, I just like Utah. I mean, I like what they have coming back with Cam Rising. I like the physical style which they play with, and I think it bodes well for them. And the Pac-12, it's probably going to cannibalize itself again. In which, when you say that, or when we say that, it means like we're going to beat each other up because the Pac-12 does it every year where like Oregon looks like they're going to go like 11-1 or 12-0 and win the Pac-12, and then they lose to like a Stanford or like an Oregon State.
Yep.
Same thing with Utah. Utah lost to UCLA and Florida last year, which knocked them out.
This year, though, is going to be even more exciting to see how all of these teams compete due to the fact that they're all going
elsewhere.
Over the place.
They're going elsewhere.
Yeah, literally. Especially
I'm interested to see how Oregon State does and Stanford and the 4 teams that are being left.
Yeah, and to see how they kind of like compete to kind of bid themselves to other conferences and last like kind of standoffish.
I mean, Cal, for example, hosts Auburn like week 2 or 3. I mean,
and imagine if they.
I don't think they'll beat Auburn,
I don't think they will either. But imagine they do, and imagine they stomp them, and imagine like by that time if teams start calling Oregon State, and it's like, oh yeah, we want y'all. But I mean, that'll be interesting too with DJ there.
He was named the starter yesterday.
And I mean,
so
I'm very intrigued to see how that situation goes. I feel like a lot of people bash him more than they should. I understand what happened at Clemson, but I still think he's all right, and I think he's good for Oregon State. But I mean, man, it's going to be interesting. I mean,
and now that brings us to our CFP picks.
Oh, dude, I don't even know my CFP picks.
I'm going to get right into it. I think this is who's going to end up at the 4. I think it's interesting. You can bash me all you want. LSU, Michigan, Clemson, and I'm putting Alabama in there. Say what you want about, Alabama, the last 2 years. They haven't been great on the road. They haven't been dominant in the run game. Everybody is doubting them, and I think that should scare the shit out of everybody. People are predicting them to go 9-3, 8-4, lose to Texas at home, lose to Tennessee at home, lose to LSU at home. I think they will lose to LSU at home. That's the only loss they suffer. But if Alabama can go 11-1, they beat Texas, probably a top 15 Texas team at home. They beat A&M on the road. They beat they beat who all they're supposed to beat. They go to Jordan-Hare. They take care of business against Auburn. If they can if they lose a close one to LSU and go 11-1, they could still potentially, depending on what LSU does. If LSU goes undefeated like I think they are, then they're not going to make the SEC championship game. But if LSU can knock out, if Georgia gets upset by Tennessee and LSU knocks out Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think Alabama's sitting there in a great spot.
They are, but I think. I mean, this is just me. I think my college football player.
And this is a little bit of biased. I'm rolling.
I'm going with my bias too, but I think it's going to be LSU, Ohio State, Florida State, Michigan. I think Michigan's going to cruise through, one loss to Ohio State. They'll sit out the Big Ten championship. I think the Pac-12 is going to be too questionable for them to get someone in. I don't think Texas is going to. I think they're going to win the Big 12, but I don't think they're going to have a good enough year to prove themselves to get into the college football playoff. And I think Michigan's taking the 4 spot, kind of like what happened last year after Ohio State lost and then got lucky enough because USC lost to Utah. Ohio State still got in, and I think that's going to go perfectly for Michigan to still slide into the playoff. 2 Big Ten teams, and LSU will be playing Michigan in first round. So
no, LSU and Michigan will be playing in the national championship. That's who I got. I got LSU. I got LSU playing Clemson in the first round. I got Michigan playing Alabama. I think LSU and Michigan pull off those wins just because I think they're a lot more, and I think they have a lot more coming back. I got LSU versus Michigan, and I got LSU winning it all. I got Brian Kelly. The last 3 coaches LSU's had, they've won a national championship with every one of them.
I got LSU, Ohio State, and I have Ohio State losing to LSU. So I think LSU is going to have one of those years. I hate to say it, and I mean, there's my bias getting Ohio State to the Natty, but it's going to be brutal if and when we lose. Hopefully it doesn't happen. I would love to see us win, but I think LSU right now.
I think LSU's just the most. I mean, not only they have the most coming back, but I think they have so much talent. I mean, they added a few transfers that are very talented. I like LSU. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I hope it's Bama. I'm hoping. We left out Georgia. It very well could be Georgia.
Georgia could come out on top of that number 1 spot.
I mean, they're the preseason favorite for a reason. They're the preseason number 1 for a reason. Their dominance the last 2 years has been unquestioned. I just think they take a little bit of a step back this year because we don't know what Carson Beck's going to be this year. They've just lost a running back to injury. They've had a little bit of distraction going on in the offseason between them and the AJC, the Atlantic Journal, and some off-the-field stuff. But Kirby knows how to motivate these guys, and I still look for Georgia to be very well in it. I think Georgia's going to, be very dominant. I think they could slip up against Tennessee on the road, and then LSU in the national and the SEC championship game. But
Man,
I could be very wrong, and if I'm wrong, Georgia fans, you can come after me.
Y'all can come after me too if Ohio State ends up losing to Michigan. It's not going to happen, but I don't know, but I think LSU is definitely coming out on top. We'll see, but they're going. I think it's going to be another year like the 2020 year.
This is definitely like the most wide open year, like because you really don't know. There's so many teams that honestly could be, like we talked about in the SEC. You got LSU, Bama, and Georgia.
The thing is, we said this last year, and Georgia back to back, and Georgia.
But in the SEC, you watch out for Tennessee, A&M, Kentucky, South Carolina.
And then same with the
Big
Ten.
Ten.
Watch out for Penn
State,
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Throw Maryland in the mix.
Iowa's going to have the best offense this year that they've had in the last 10 years.
Well, they got to quit.
McNamara starting quarterback. They got a ton of transfer wide receivers, a couple of big receivers. They actually got a wide receiver from Ohio State too.
Well, you could say Iowa's betting on themselves.
They are. They are. And I don't think Iowa's going to be there, but I'm just saying they can still come out on top of the West.
Then in the Big 12, look out for Texas and OU. Look out for Texas Tech. Look out for Kansas State.
Some of the new teams. Look out for UCF. Who knows? But UCF, BYU,
And then the teams we mentioned: the ACC, Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, and then Utah. The Pac-12 is as wide open as it's ever been. So you never know. And then this is the last year where we'll be debating this kind of format.
Yeah.
It'll be 12 teams next year, and I think with a lot of both the SEC and Big Ten, it's not a matter of if Bama gets in, if LSU gets in, if Michigan or Ohio State get in. I think it's what seed.
And I think it depends on whoever they're playing too.
Yeah. And if they have the bye or if
they're playing at home.
Because
the first week of college football playoff. And that's one thing that once we get there next year when we're talking about this stuff, that's going to be the exciting part.
It's going to be different for sure.
Yeah, looking into playoff games in December and January that could
and new teams and new conferences. Good Lord, it's all happened so fast. But let's focus on this season.
Yeah.
So it's a few days away. So this was our picks. Preseason picks, they mean nothing because they probably don't go the way we want them to. Anything can happen, and so
let's dive into some of the stuff. Recent buzz in college football and looking ahead to some of the first week's games this week with some of the bigger matchups of week 0.
All right, before we dive into segment 2, I think our other sponsor, Now Fitness. Now Fitness is a gym and fitness center based in Groveville, Alabama. They do personal training, group sessions, and with CrossFit and other workouts, and they help local athletes train and get in their best shape. Give them a call at 251-269-3065 for more.
All right, so looking straight into do you want to go straight into the college football week 0? And
I just wanted to talk about the Reggie Bush stuff.
Okay, yeah. That's something else that I'm kind of I don't know. I don't really have mixed emotions about it, but it's just interesting because Reggie Bush came out today and is actually filing a defamation lawsuit against the NCAA.
Give him back his Heisman, man.
Yeah,
give him back.
Exactly, and that's I feel like that's what the main issue of this whole thing is. The main reason though why he's filing this defamation lawsuit is because some things that the NCAA said about Reggie Bush that I guess were false. And it's because of the fact that they said Reggie Bush was getting paid to play back in the 2005 season when he won the Heisman.
Yeah.
And in 2010, his Heisman was taken away. But, I guess they're saying that Reggie Bush's team is saying that there have been multiple false statements made about Reggie Bush by the NCAA, stuff that never happened, and stuff that Reggie Bush was accused of that that literally just never happened.
It says it was stemming from a 2021 statement. This is CBS Sports.com article by them that made by an NCAA spokesperson claiming Bush was involved in a pay-for-play arrangement, which was the reason that he got his Heisman stripped from him. I don't care what you say.
Either way, give the man his Heisman back.
Being paid doesn't affect your performance. Well, it can, but it doesn't. it doesn't affect his performance on the field. I mean,
exactly.
the man was electric.
He had one of the best.
He earned that Heisman on the field. I mean,
that Heisman, that year was insane. The way he played, I don't know. I think that he deserves the Heisman back.
And in the recent wake of the Johnny Manziel Untold documentary, where Johnny Manziel was literally accepting like hundreds of thousands of dollars for autographs. And he only got like half a game suspension for all that, and not to mention the dude never watched film in his life.
Exactly. And you never stripped Johnny Manziel's Heisman.
Yeah, Johnny Manziel is literally known for his Heisman.
Exactly. So it's like give Reggie Bush, give the man his Heisman back, man. I mean, and now Reggie Bush is probably going to get some money out of the fact that he's filing this defamation lawsuit.
He'll probably win it, and I hope he does. I hope they give him back his Heisman. Especially now with, NIL and say what you want, it is starting to become pay for play. I mean, especially in the bigger schools. I mean, but I mean, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't affect their performance on the field. I mean, the only reason you're paying them is so they can come to your school. They're going to be great wherever they go.
Yep.
Same thing with Reggie Bush. He was probably going to be great wherever he went, whether it was USC or wherever else he was being recruited to. I was too young. I don't know where he was where else he was being recruited to, but I know the dude was a beast on the field.
Dude was a dog. But I mean, moving aside that situation.
Speaking of USC, though,
USC does play
this weekend.
But I wanted to draw heads to the first game. First game of week 0 is Navy at
Notre Dame in Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah, well,
that game
consisted as the home team. Yeah,
that game last year was Northwestern and Nebraska, and that was a crapshoot of a game. But I still watched. I think Northwestern won that game, didn't they? And then they went. That was their only game they won.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, I'm intrigued to see how it ends up turning out. I mean, it's literally what kicks off the college football season. Notre Dame's ranked 13th. I think every year Notre Dame is a little overhyped. I think they're
a little bit underrated. I mean,
they do have Sam Hartman coming in, and I mean, you're going into Freeman's second year coaching, and
I don't think Notre Dame makes the playoff, but I think they are a sleeper because their schedule is not a cakewalk. The knock on Notre Dame, especially both times that they made the playoff, the time they made the national championship game in 2012 when they got slaughtered by Bama, and then the second time they got slaughtered by Bama in the playoff in 2020, is that they had easy schedules.
They do play as of right now. Yeah, you look
at NC State, Ohio State
at home,
at Duke, who's going to be a sleeper with Riley Leonard, 251 kid. USC, they go on the road to Louisville, at Clemson, Wake Forest, at Stanford. So their schedule is not easy, and if they could get that schedule
with maybe 2 losses,
maybe 1 or 2 losses, they would be in a good spot. If they could knock off Ohio State at home, I mean, who knows? They could. Sam Hartman's going to be a dog. So
Sam Hartman will be a dog. I mean, we've talked about that.
But I think they'll beat Navy with ease. Week 0, there's not a lot of competition games. I mean,
maybe Hawaii at Vanderbilt.
I think. I don't know. Vanderbilt is like an 18-point favorite, so I don't know. I mean, but that is interesting.
Hawaii, though.
That is interesting because Vanderbilt traveled all the way to Hawaii last year, and I remember that game being on at like 11 o'clock at night, and I still watched it, and it was great. But
it'll also be interesting. This is a side note, but is Vanderbilt Stadium going to be finished?
Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. So Hawaii's going to be coming in and like a third of the stadium's just going to be demolished.
Now Vanderbilt could be a little bit better than everybody expects them to be. I still think they probably finished last in the SEC East or last in the SEC period probably. But they're all right. I mean, Clark Lee is doing some things there. I mean. But we know Vanderbilt, they're not a football school. They never have been. So, but
a sleeper game to watch out for: UMass at New Mexico State, 6 p.m. ESPN slate. Man, that's the game to watch right there. New Mexico State on top. I'm telling you right now.
Now the bigger matchups are next Thursday's game at the 31st. You got Nebraska and Minnesota. You got Minnesota with all that stuff that came out about PJ Fleck. Some players coming out or. Something coming out saying that he's like harsh on his players. And Nebraska, Matt Rule's first game at Nebraska, on the road to Minnesota.
Florida at Utah.
I'm gonna give Minnesota the win here. I just think it is Matt Rule's first game. I think it could be tough. But the big one that week is Florida at Utah.
That game is going to be fun to watch.
Florida got by that game by 3 points last year because Anthony Richardson was a freak. So was Cam Rising in that game.
You saw what Utah did at the end of the year last year, just went on a roll. And I mean, right now they're looking to go back into that game and just hopefully drown them.
I'm picking Utah, but I would not be surprised to see Florida win that game just because Billy Napier, I think, is a little bit underrated. I don't know what Florida's going to be this year. It's hard to predict them right now. Graham Mertz is unknown. I mean, he wasn't able to do much at Wisconsin, but Wisconsin wasn't able to do much, period, with the last couple of years.
Yeah, literally. So.
But I'm going with Utah to win this game. Like I said, I like Utah. I like what they got coming back, and they're just physical, man. If any team can match up with the physicality of an SEC or Big Ten team from the Pac-12, it's Oregon or Utah, and I think Utah matches up pretty well with Florida.
I think Utah, though, I don't know. I think they're drowning the Gators week one. I just think that and we talked about Utah, how they have the potential to come back out on top of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida's going to be good, but I don't think, and I know Florida's an SEC team, whatever you want to say, it just means more. But I think Utah is going to demolish them, and I think that they're going to be doing business week one. They got to start the year off strong.
There's a little bit of Sun Belt action going on Thursday as well. Rhode Island going to Georgia State. I mean, we pay attention to the Sun Belt because South Alabama plays in the Sun Belt. But yeah, there's not a lot of entertaining games, but there are some. And
either way, though, it's just going to be it's
college.
Fun.
It's college football is back. That's
exactly.
right. So
I mean, that's the only thing that matters. I don't care who's playing. I know this upcoming Saturday, like week 0, I work a little bit, but best believe that during work, after work, before work, I'm going to be checking.
And then even like next Friday, the September 1st, before the real week 1. You got Louisville at Georgia Tech. You got Stanford at Hawaii. You got
Central Michigan at
Michigan State.
Yeah,
and then you got week 1 on September 2nd. I mean,
we can't go into week 1.
I know, but still there's
a
lot of. You got Virginia at Tennessee. You got Colorado at TCU. Prime's first game.
Yeah,
and
that's going to be a huge game for Colorado week 1.
Ohio State's going to lose on the road to Indiana first game. I'm joking.
Just wait, you'll see. Don't worry about it.
But anyway, next week we're going to try to start something new. We're going to try to do a college game. We're not doing like on game day, but we're going to do it like before the end of each episode. We're going to preview that week's games. So next week we'll be doing week 1. We're going to try to have a guest picker on. It can be anybody if you want to be a part of it. Just let us know. We can get you on through Zoom, or if you're a student here, or a player, or a coach here at South, or if some of our friends want to come on and be our guest picker, just let us know, and we'll get you in here, and it should be fun. It can be pretty fun, and we're excited to see where it takes us.
Heck yeah, I'm so pumped. So thank you for tuning in to episode 21 of the Back of the End Zone podcast. I'm Josh Reisig here with Brian Koleski.
It's been a blast.
College football is back, baby.
Like Jimmy Neutron said, have a blast.